Hey guys, and welcome back to my podcast. Today, I literally have no plan as to where this episode will be going. Literally, don't really have an idea, except one, I guess, but like I have no real direction for this episode. None of my episodes ever do, but this one especially doesn't. So, as I mentioned in every single episode, don't have high expectations. In fact, I recommend you have medium to low expectations. But, anyways, let's get straight into it. So, guys, I was thinking, and this is that one idea I was talking about. I was thinking about this because I was watching an interview of a musician on my TikTok for you page, and I was just thinking actually, okay, it was Madison Beer, okay? And actually, I do like Madison Beer. I do like her music. I like her as a person from what I know of, but I also know that there are things out there online that are, um, I guess they say things that she's done in the past, and maybe that doesn't show the best of her character. So maybe she's not as good of a person as maybe we see online. And honestly, I would believe that because I have this personal belief that literally all these celebrities are complete narcissists and there's just no way they're a good person. Like you cannot be a celebrity and be a good person pretty much for the most part. For like the vast majority. But anyways, that's not my main topic here, but I was like watching this video of Madison Beer and it kind of just got me thinking about this thought that I've had about musicians and honestly just artists in general. Like literally like every single artist, musician, actor, creative person in the entertainment industry, I think they all tend to do this. And I've noticed this thing that they all do where basically, gosh, how do I break this down? So, okay, well, I have noticed that for all of these different musicians, for example, let's talk about musicians in particular, right? For all these musicians, first of all, I don't think that these people genuinely actually have a strong grasp. I'm talking about, by the way, like the musicians, like the mainstream ones or the ones that we all know. But honestly, I think this still applies to a lot of musicians, even if they are indie musicians or musicians that, aren't really mainstream or popular or anything like that. But I have noticed that there is this, how do I phrase this? There's this like interesting focus on expressing emotions and talking about emotions during interviews with musicians. And, it kind of makes sense because, you know, I guess there is this pervasive belief in society, which I guess it's an accurate belief too, that art is inherently an emotional, uh, I don't know, form of expressing creativity and it is intertwined with emotions. So I guess it makes sense that, musicians, actors, artists in general, they talk about their emotions in interviews, but honestly, it just feels so forced now. And I think that maybe, I mean, granted, I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass here, okay? Because I am not that old. I'm still Gen Z. Like I was born in 2001, okay? So I'm not like super old, so I wasn't super um old when like I don't know, like the early 2000s celebrities were super popular. So I don't know for sure, but from my understanding of things, I feel like back then I just don't think that there was as much of an emphasis on emotions as there is now when it comes to discussing maybe your album and during the album rollout time and everything, like when celebrities or whatever, they go on press tours, for example. And I think that it's very interesting because yeah, it just wasn't like that back then. It was a lot more technical. And it's the same thing like with, actually, let me backtrack before I get into that thought. But I just think it's very interesting because now, maybe a couple of decades later, it's not really about emotions. It's not, wait, what am I saying? Sorry, ignore what I just said. I meant to say it's not really about the technical aspects of the work, the technical aspects of the job that you're there to do. It's about emotions. It's about appealing to the emotional psyche of a human being, which is interesting. And again, it does make sense on a certain level because yes, like art is inherently intertwined with emotion. It's not as much of a logical field, I would say. So I would say it is more of an emotional field, but I think it's interesting um because it actually reminds me of, and I'll actually I have a point to all this, by the way, but it actually, on an off topic tangent, it reminds me of medicine because I feel like, and I'm just, again, this is not a belief I literally had until 2 seconds ago as I'm talking out loud. I'm realizing this. That I think it's interesting that in medicine, for example, so I was in medical school. I'm not in medical school anymore. I'll probably talk about it more in depth later on. I did mention it in a previous video. I used to be in medical school and then I got dismissed from my school for academic reasons. I like marginally failed an exam and they kicked me out. So, anyways, basically, I think it's interesting because I think like the more developed maybe a field gets, the more you kind of have to move away from the technical aspects of a role or the technical aspects of a job, and the more you have to rely on other things, like maybe things that are involved in the human psyche. And I think maybe it's also related to competition. Like, again, like also the more competitive something is, the more you have to rely on other factors. Because, for example, if you're not very familiar with this whole medicine world, the way that it is now in the United States is basically, I mean, it's a very, very competitive process. And yes, you need to have all these different stats, and you have to have all these really great extracurriculars and leadership opportunities and shadowing and research and everything and all this kind of stuff. But something I noticed, like in medical school admissions and in the admissions process, is that there was a lot of interesting, I guess, emphasis on things related to emotions. And like, yes, we all know that these like types of schools, they aren't just looking for good stats, right? Like they want to have a well-rounded person and they want to know that you're a real person. But I noticed that, at least in my experience, like what worked was tapping into the emotional aspect of who I am, and that's what kind of made me succeed in a way in terms of like getting into a medical school. So like I remember, for example, like one of my interview questions was like, it was like a situational hypothetical situation about like a hypothetical city and like the homeless population in the city. And anyways, this is like so off topic, but my point though is that I remember, like, I think that just gives an example. Well, I didn't really explain it though, so I guess maybe you don't know what the example is. But like basically, like my answer, it like was very much tapped into like the emotional aspect of being a human being, and not so much the technical aspects of medicine or the technical aspects of wanting to be a doctor or whatever it is. It's not really focused on that. So I think it kind of is maybe linked to uh what's it called, to the entertainment industry, because maybe as the competition increases in an industry and the more strong candidates you've got, maybe you have to find other ways to differentiate one person from another. And now this sounds again a little bit different from what I was originally talking about, because I know I was originally talking about musicians who have already become musicians, or, well, I guess I don't know how you define become musicians. I don't really think that's a thing, but anyways, oh my god, I'm like talking so much. But I think that like it's a little bit different, like what I said originally versus like what I just said, because I think that um I don't know, like the competitiveness of maybe acting or the music industry is different from what I was originally talking about with like the Madison beer thing, for example. It's not just Madison beer, actually. It has not necessarily that much to do with Madison beer. It's more about a lot of musicians: Ariana Grande, Sabrina Carpenter, Olivia Rodrigo, Tate McRae, even Chappell, Roan, Billie Eilish. Like, I'm just naming all like the main ones that come to my head. Taylor Swift. Like every single musician, I have definitely noticed within the past like 5 to 10 years, especially, this huge wave of musicians and actors too, somewhat to a lesser extent, because their life isn't as public, and they don't rely on their personal life as much for, I guess, success, or however they define success. But anyways, I think over the past 5-10 years, especially because of the Emma Chamberlain effect and like the whole like authenticity and vulnerability and relatability aspect, I think that obviously has like pushed people into getting themselves to open up more or just like show a more vulnerable side online, and that's therefore why TikTok exists and why it did so well. Like I don't think TikTok would be as big as it is now if it existed maybe a few years ago. But anyways, yeah, so I think that yes, like there are a lot of different contributing factors to this interesting wave of, I guess, just like this push and almost need and it all well, actually, let me stop myself there before I go any further yet. But like this like interesting push for these musicians and actors to talk about their emotions in interviews when it comes to like maybe a song, or not even like just a song, but just like to talk about the emotional aspect of creating. And it just honestly, not to be like a hater or like a pseudo intellectual sounding person, because I really don't think I am, but I do think that it honestly does, guys, it does sound fake and artificial to me when I hear a lot of these musicians. Because, well, okay, I saw this TikTok comment. By the way, I have ADHD. I've mentioned this before and I'm going to say it again because I know I'm going all over the place in this episode. But anyways, I saw this TikTok comment like some time ago, and it was like, I think it was I can't remember who it was actually, but I think it was like some famous singer. It might have been Ariana. By the way, guys, I used to be a humongous Ariana fan. Like like an actual OG fan. Like you have no idea. And I'll talk about that some other time. But anyways, it was like some really big famous person. And someone in the comments literally ate them up, bro. They literally said like she she has so much she wants to say, but she doesn't have the vocabulary to say it. And I have not stopped thinking about that comment since, because I feel like that applies to not just celebrities, but so many people in general, but also like celebrities especially, because I feel like that's so true. Like a lot of these celebrities did not finish like high school, or I don't know, they didn't really try to educate themselves even. Like even if you didn't go to high school, at least try to like educate yourself when you have the entire world at your fingertips, like I don't know. But anyways, like my main point though is I think it's so interesting because that comment, again, it like pertains to a lot of celebrities and a lot of people. And I think that what was I saying? What do I think? um yeah, I just think that it's very interesting because, oh my god, sorry guys, I like literally lost my train of thought completely. Like what was I just saying? Um give me a second. Um Oh yeah. Well, basically, I think it's interesting because these celebrities, okay, like entertainment people, as we've kind of talked about, like a lot of them have not really pursued very like high education, which by the way, that sounds so bad. I don't mean for it to sound like being higher, like, or not, okay, sorry, having higher education means you're one thing or another. I actually firmly do not believe that. I think it's completely dependent on resources sometimes. A lot of the times, most of the times in America, if you're excluding like the nepo babies. But I was going to say though that they have the opportunity to pursue higher education and they don't do that. And I think it really shows. And that's why people don't really like Emma Chamberlain's podcast as much now. Me personally, I do like her podcast. I don't think she says anything revolutionary, if I'm being honest. I don't really think anything she ever says usually is like super extravagantly like out of the box creative to me, but I do enjoy it. And I think sometimes I like the way that she like breaks things down, and I like it and I enjoy it. But anyways, these celebrities, I'm going off on so many different tangents, but these celebrities, they fundamentally do not have the vocabulary that they need in order to express these emotions that they are trying to describe in like in these interviews, I mean. And if you're someone with some level of intellectual capacity, or that sounds like not like a correct sentence, like capacity, that's not the right word, but if you are someone who has a brain, okay, like I feel like you can discern very easily who is like using like these therapy speak words and who is actually someone saying something that is substantial and filled with meaning, you know? And I think that whenever I listen to a lot of celebrities talking about maybe their, like specifically musicians, I guess, in this context, when musicians are talking about their work, they really try to tap into that emotional aspect, and they just like, I don't know how to explain it, but they just like dance around the subject of what they're talking about in such a pseudo emotional way. And I don't like that. I don't like that because it just sounds so fake and artificial. And I know that they don't even fully believe it sometimes, or I don't think they really grasp what they're saying, if that makes sense. Or they don't, not even what they're saying, but they don't grasp the emotional aspect of their art sometimes, it feels like. Because honestly, in their brains, it's just like, I made something that I like, and that's about it, and that's as far as their brain can go. Like they don't really try to deeply understand what they're making, and they don't even have necessarily that emotional connection to it, because I think that they mistake emotional, and this is like a whole other thing actually that I was thinking about the other day, but I think that they mistake emotional expression with emotional regulation, and it's not the same thing, by the way. I haven't seen anyone say that online, but I'm telling you that right now. Okay. But anyways, I think my main point to this whole episode, by the way, is that I don't think that singers, actors, entertainment industry people, I really don't think that they actually understand what they're making. And I don't think that they know what they're saying, but I think because of this huge, like, I don't know, maybe push towards like emotional relationships to their art, I guess. Maybe it's a PR move, maybe it's like their team telling them to do it. But I feel like that's become such a huge thing nowadays that now in interviews, musicians are talking about like some kind of way, I guess, that connects to emotions, or not connects to emotions, but it connects their art with emotions, but they don't actually seem to have very strong emotional intelligence, and they do not seem to actually emotionally understand the art in the way that they're trying to make it seem like that they do, if that makes sense. And I think that really bothers me. um and I know why it bothers me, and I don't want to keep talking too much about why, but I think that it's like interesting is all I'm saying, because I honestly wish that these people would just be genuinely honest, because I know it feels like they're putting up a facade as to how like vulnerable and honest that they are being, because I feel like the appeal to, showing this emotional side of the art, I think it's supposed to, tap into the side of humans who, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Like it's trying to tap into that thing, that phenomenon, I guess, that we've had over the past 5 or 10 years, where vulnerability is in and authenticity is in, and I think it's supposed to tap into that, but it just isn't working because they're not actually saying anything substantial. So then I'm like, so then you're not actually being vulnerable, and you're not actually being honest or authentic. Because, sorry, sorry, jump scare. But you're not actually being vulnerable or honest or authentic, because you like don't even know how to do that. But then maybe they are being as vulnerable as they can, so maybe I can't give them that like like much judgment for it. But it's just like frustrating, because to me it just always feels so artificial whenever I see this nowadays. It's like, through the Zach Sang show, and like through even like Call Her Daddy, or like, I'm trying to think. There's like so many things. Maybe like Pod Crushed. Actually, Pod Crush isn't as bad on that, I guess. Well, I don't know. It's not even like the interviewers' fault necessarily, but I think the interviewers, they do also contribute to this like thing that I've noticed. But I just feel like it always just feels so like forced, is what I'm trying to say, because I feel like it just never really feels like the artist really understand, and I know I'm being repetitive here, but it really never feels like the artist actually understands their work on an emotional level. So I'm like, why are you trying to make it seem like you do, and that is my main point. um and ultimately, yes, like I know that like my belief in this is also related to the fact that I do not really have the highest opinion of celebrities and entertainment industry people. But can you blame me? Okay, I have analyzed human nature to a very large extent, and I do think that it kind of relates. And yeah, as I said earlier, I do think maybe it has something to do with like maybe these labels trying to find a way to distinguish, these different artists. Because also, like, if you have, let's say you have like a group of five different pop stars, right? Yes, maybe their music sounds different, but I feel like connecting, the emotionality aspect to the music in a way, I think that like provides these musicians with a way to separate themselves from each other. These Sorry, that sounded like so grammatically wrong. It allows these pop stars, these musicians to separate themselves um more from each other and distinguish themselves from each other. And I think that helps their identity, that helps their brand. And it ultimately just feels like a PR move to me and not as much like an authenticity move to me. And hey, I would love to be proved wrong. I'm sure there are probably some small amount of musicians or actors who are actually emotionally intelligent and are able to do this properly, like actually like, really assess their emotions and how it relates to the art that they're creating. But I don't think that a lot of them can or do in our current industry. And that is what I mainly had to talk about today. I actually have more thoughts that I could go on and on about on this topic, but I'm gonna end it here because I actually don't want this episode to be too long. But yeah, I guarantee you probably haven't heard anyone say this online before, or if you have, send that link my way because I would actually love to hear someone else talk about this. It's just something that I have noticed because it just, as I said earlier, it always just feels so forced, and I don't know. It's interesting because I just think that a lot of people don't really seem to understand their emotions or understand what they do and why they do it. And that is fundamentally very incongruous. Is that a word? I don't know. Incongruent. I don't really know at all, but it just doesn't align with what I value in life, I guess, and that's why it bothers me so much. So, anyways, I'm gonna go. I hope you guys have a great day. And this was a pretty short episode in comparison to some of my other episodes. But yeah, that's all for now. All right, goodbye.